The afternoon sun painted Willow Creek estates in shades of gold, casting long shadows across the perfectly trimmed lawns. It was one of those neighborhoods where the mailboxes matched, the fences had identical heights, and the homeowners association ruled like an unspoken monarchy. To an outsider, it looked like paradise. To those who lived there, it often felt like a stage where appearances mattered more than reality. Marcus Reed, however, wasn't concerned with appearances that day. He had just returned home from a grueling week of 12-hour shifts and was grateful for a rare Saturday off. Standing by his truck, he popped open the tailgate and began unloading his gear. A duffel bag, a pair of boots, and his tactical vest, tools of his profession. He moved methodically, careful as always, humming under his breath. On his hip sat his service weapon, holstered in plain view. To Marcus, it was as ordinary as wearing a belt. He had worn it so long that he sometimes forgot it was even there. As a federal law enforcement officer, being armed was not a choice, it was a duty, one drilled into him since the academy. He was off duty but never truly off. Across the street, hidden behind gauzy curtains, Karen Whitfield's eyes narrowed. The self-appointed queen of Willow Creek Estates, Karen had built her reputation on writing complaint letters and enforcing rules nobody else cared about. To her, Marcus was a problem. Not because of anything he had actually done, but because he didn't fit the picture-perfect image of the community she thought she owned. She leaned closer to the window, squinting. "What is he up to now?" she muttered, clutching her iced tea glass. The condensation left wet circles on the pristine wooden sill, but she didn't notice. Her gaze was locked on Marcus, who at that moment was lifting his vest and folding it neatly before tucking it into his bag. To Karen, the sight was terrifying. A black man, a gun, a vest that looked military in her eyes. She filled in the rest of the story herself. "He's preparing for something. I knew it. He doesn't belong here." Her pulse quickened as she grabbed her phone. The thrill of being the protector of the neighborhood coursed through her. This was her moment to show everyone, once again, that without her vigilance, Willow Creek would fall into chaos. When the 911 dispatcher answered, Karen's voice carried a mixture of fear and self-importance. "Yes, hello, I need to report a man with a gun. He's outside right now, in Willow Creek Estates, unloading dangerous-looking gear from his truck. Yes, he has a firearm on his hip, just out in the open. He's black, tall, maybe 6 feet, mid-30s. He looks like trouble." Her words tumbled out like bullets, each one more exaggerated than the last. She peeked again through the curtains, lowering her voice theatrically. "He's handling some kind of vest now. Looks tactical. You'd better hurry before something happens." The dispatcher, trained to take such calls seriously, promised units were on their way. Karen ended the call, a triumphant smile tugging at her lips. She straightened her blouse, took a sip of iced tea, and whispered, "That'll teach him." Meanwhile, Marcus remained unaware of the storm brewing. He crouched to tie down the loose strap on his duffel bag, his thoughts wandering to his niece's soccer game later that afternoon. The only thing on his mind was whether he'd have time to mow the lawn before heading out again. Then, faintly at first, came the sound of sirens. The kind of sound that didn't belong in Willow Creek Estates, where the loudest noise was usually a barking dog or a passing lawnmower. Marcus looked up, puzzled. His brow furrowed as the wail grew louder, closer, urgent. Across the street, Karen's heart leapt. She clutched her phone again, already rehearsing how she would tell the arriving officers she had saved the day. In her mind, she imagined the neighbors gathering to thank her, the board praising her for her vigilance. Marcus, however, felt a different shift in the air. He noticed the way the sirens didn't pass by, but instead slowed, turned, and grew louder until 2 squad cars screeched around the corner. He instinctively knew what was about to happen. Years of experience had trained him to recognize that sudden tightening of the atmosphere, the moment before escalation. And across the street, behind her curtains, Karen whispered with satisfaction, "Finally. They'll handle this menace once and for all." Marcus straightened slowly as the wail of sirens cut through the stillness of Willow Creek Estates. The sound grew louder, then exploded into the quiet street as 2 squad cars swung around the corner, their red and blue lights flashing violently against the white picket fences and brick facades. Tires screeched, rubber biting into asphalt, until both vehicles jolted to a stop right at the edge of his driveway. The calm, golden afternoon had transformed into something electric and dangerous. Neighbors' blinds fluttered, doors creaked open, curious faces peeked out, drawn by the commotion. "Sir," Hands where we can see them. A young officer barked, his voice sharp, adrenaline-fueled. He leapt from the passenger side of the first car, his hand already gripping the butt of his holstered pistol. Marcus froze, his instincts firing. He knew this script well, it was the one he had trained rookies for countless times. The first step was always the same: don't move too fast, don't escalate, don't give them a reason. Slowly, he raised his hands, palms out, his voice steady despite the frustration building in his chest. "I live here," Marcus said, projecting calm authority. "My name is Marcus Reed. I'm on my property. I'm going to explain." But before he could finish, Karen burst out her front door like an actress arriving on stage. Her hands flew dramatically toward the officers as she pointed across the street. "That's him. That's the man. He's been waving his gun around all afternoon. I told you he was dangerous." The younger officer shot her a quick glance, his body language tightening even more. He took a cautious step toward Marcus, his voice harsher now. "Keep your hands up, sir. Don't reach for anything." Marcus held still, jaw tightening. His heart beat hard in his chest, not from fear of guilt, he had nothing to hide, but from the knowledge of how easily these situations spiraled. He had seen them turn deadly in less time than it took to blink. The senior officer stepped out of the second car, moving slower, his eyes locked on Marcus with the studied calm of someone with more years on the job. His hand hovered near his holster, but unlike his partner, he didn't draw. He was watching, measuring. Marcus turned his head toward him. His voice was low, controlled, and deliberate. "Officer, I am law enforcement. I am reaching slowly for my identification. My badge is in my back pocket. My firearm is holstered and secure. I am not a threat." The younger officer bristled, eyes flicking between Marcus's hip and his hands. "We'll see about that. Keep your hands where they are." The tension was thick, like static in the air before a lightning strike. The neighbors who had gathered on their porches whispered nervously. A few held up phones, recording. The entire cul-de-sac had turned into an audience to a high-stakes play, one where the lead actor's life hung in the balance. The senior officer finally spoke. His voice was calm, commanding. "Let him reach." The younger cop hesitated, then gave a short, jerky nod. Moving with exaggerated slowness, Marcus lowered one hand toward his back pocket. He kept his eyes locked on the officers, narrating every motion like he had done 100 times during field training. "I am reaching for my credentials. Pulling them out now. Flipping them open." The leather wallet appeared, slim and professional. Marcus held it high, letting the sunlight catch the badge inside. The gleaming federal seal sparkled like a mirror, reflecting the flashing police lights. The senior officer stepped forward, eyes narrowing as he inspected the emblem. His posture shifted almost instantly, the tension draining from his shoulders. Recognition hit. He snapped upright, clicked his heels together, and raised his hand in a crisp salute. The younger officer blinked, confused. "Wait, what?" Karen's smirk, which had been plastered across her face since the squad cars arrived, melted in an instant. "Wah! What are you doing?" she stammered, pointing wildly at Marcus. "He's dangerous. He had a gun. I saw him. He's one of those." The senior officer cut her off with a glare, his salute still held high. "Special Agent Marcus Reed," he said firmly, almost with reverence. "Department of Homeland Security. He's one of us." The silence that followed was heavy. Neighbors shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other, cameras still recording. The younger cop slowly lowered his hand from his holster, his face flushing with embarrassment. Marcus, still calm, tucked his credentials back into his pocket and let his hands fall to his sides. "I told you," he said evenly, his voice carrying not just to the officers, but to Karen and every neighbor watching. "I'm not a threat. I'm just your neighbor." Karen's face twisted as though she'd swallowed something bitter. For the first time since she had moved into Willow Creek Estates, she had no words. The crisp salute hung in the air like a gunshot. The senior officer's hand remained fixed to his brow, his back straight, his eyes steady on Marcus. For a moment, the flashing red and blue lights seemed to freeze in time, reflecting off his polished badge. The younger officer, caught between confusion and embarrassment, shifted awkwardly on his feet. "Wait. What's going on? You're saluting him. Why?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying his inexperience. The older cop lowered his hand, his tone clipped and authoritative. "Because that man is a federal agent. Special Agent Marcus Reed, Department of Homeland Security. He outranks both of us." Gasps rippled across the cul-de-sac. Neighbors leaned in closer, whispers spreading like wildfire. The phones that had been recording kept rolling, lenses fixed on the surreal image, the police saluting the very man Karen had called them on. Marcus finally lowered his hands completely, his voice calm but edged with steel. He turned toward Karen, who stood frozen on her lawn in wide-eyed disbelief. "You heard him," Marcus said, his voice steady enough for every neighbor to hear. "I carry my firearm because it's my job. I don't get to take it off when I come home, and I don't need your permission to wear it." Karen's face went red, blotches rising on her cheeks. She shook her head furiously, her words tumbling out in a desperate rush. No, that can't be right. He was messing with some kind of gear. He was going to. Gear I use to keep this country safe, Marcus interrupted firmly. Tactical vest. Duty bag. Standard issue for federal law enforcement. Nothing illegal. Nothing dangerous. Unless, of course, the danger is me existing in my own driveway while black. The crowd murmured louder now, the weight of Marcus's words settling in. A few neighbors lowered their phones, guilt flickering across their faces as they realized what they had been so quick to believe. Karen sputtered, her voice cracking. You're twisting this. I was just doing what any responsible HOA president would do. I saw a threat and I acted. The senior officer cut his eyes toward her, his jaw tight. Ma'am, you told dispatch he was waving his gun around. That was false. What we found was a man unloading equipment calmly, never brandishing his weapon, never making threats. Do you understand the risk you put him in with that call? Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. For once, the HOA queen had been stripped of her power. Marcus took a deep breath, his voice lowering but carrying further now, deliberate and precise. Do you know how many times this exact scene ends differently? How many men who look like me don't get the chance to explain before a trigger gets pulled? You wanted me in cuffs, or worse, because in your eyes, my presence was a threat before I even said a word. Silence settled over the cul-de-sac. The only sound was the faint hum of the squad car engines and the clicking of a recording phone somewhere in the crowd. The younger officer, clearly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. Sir, I apologize for how I approached. We take these calls seriously, but I see now this was not what it seemed. Marcus gave him a long look, then nodded once. Apology accepted. Just remember, your instincts are important, but they can't be rooted in fear of the wrong people. The senior officer added, his voice clipped, we'll be filing this call as a false report. And ma'am, he turned directly toward Karen, consider this a warning. Wasting police resources, exaggerating details, and targeting neighbors out of bias is unacceptable. Do it again, and there will be consequences. Karen's lips trembled. She looked around, seeking support from the very neighbors she had spent years intimidating with fines, letters, and threats of HOA penalties. But none came to her defense. They stood with arms crossed or phones raised, their faces reflecting disappointment, shame, or quiet satisfaction at seeing her finally cornered. One of the neighbors, a middle-aged woman from down the block, muttered just loud enough to be heard, about time someone stood up to her. Marcus glanced at her, then at the rest of the crowd. His voice softened, but the weight of his words lingered like iron. I'm not your enemy. I'm your neighbor. But if this community can't tell the difference between a threat and a man coming home from work, then maybe the problem isn't me. The senior officer gave Marcus one final salute, this time deliberately in full view of everyone. Agent Reed, he said formally, thank you for your service. We'll clear the scene. And just like that, the officers returned to their cars. The flashing lights died, the sirens faded, and the cul-de-sac was left in stunned silence. Karen, her arms wrapped around herself, muttered something incoherent and stormed back into her house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass. But the damage was done. The neighborhood had seen the truth. They had seen Karen's bias laid bare, and they had seen Marcus not just endure it, but rise above it with dignity. And though the squad cars had driven away, the salute they witnessed that afternoon would echo far longer than the sirens. By sunrise the next morning, Willow Creek estates buzzed with whispers. The dramatic scene from the previous day had already spread beyond the cul-de-sac. Neighbors who had recorded the incident uploaded clips online, and overnight the video caught fire. The title alone carried weight. HOA Karen calls cops on black man, 42 seconds later they salute his badge. By breakfast, the HOA president's reputation had become a meme. Karen tried to save face quickly. She fired off a neighborhood email calling for an emergency HOA meeting that evening. The message painted herself as a misunderstood guardian of the community, a woman whose instincts had been, tragically misinterpreted. But the tone of the replies, or rather, the lack of them, made it clear, her neighbors weren't buying it. When the meeting convened in the clubhouse, usually filled with chatter about landscaping budgets and pool schedules, the atmosphere was tense. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of skeptical residents. Eyes darted toward Karen, who sat stiffly at the front, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Marcus arrived a few minutes late. The room shifted when he walked in, part curiosity, part respect. He didn't come in uniform, just in a plain shirt and slacks, but the weight of yesterday's events seemed to follow him like a shadow. He greeted a few neighbors politely before taking a seat in the back, content to observe. Karen cleared her throat, the microphone squealing slightly. "Everyone, thank you for coming on such short notice. As your HOA president, I want to assure you that my actions yesterday were solely motivated by concern for our community. I saw something alarming, and as any responsible citizen would, A hand shot up from the crowd. It was Mrs. Alvarez from 2 doors down, her eyes sharp. Concern for the community, or concern for the fact that Marcus is black and had a holstered firearm he is legally required to carry. The room buzzed. Karen stammered, that is not fair. I don't see color, I see safety risks. Another neighbor, Mr. Patel, cut her off. We've all seen the video, Karen. You told the police he was waving his gun around. That was a lie, he wasn't. We watched him stand perfectly still until those officers nearly drew on him. Karen's face reddened, her grip on the microphone tightening. I was mistaken. But you can't blame me for being vigilant. A deep voice from the back interrupted. Vigilance and prejudice aren't the same thing. All heads turned toward Marcus. He stood slowly, walking to the front with calm steps. The microphone passed to him without protest. He faced the crowd, his voice even but powerful. I didn't come here tonight to argue with Karen. I came here because what happened yesterday wasn't just about me, it was about what this neighborhood is becoming. Willow Creek Estates is supposed to be a community. But when your first instinct is to see a black man with a holstered firearm and call the cops, that's not community. That's suspicion. That's bias. The room was silent, every word landing like a stone dropped in still water. Marcus continued, I carry a gun because I'm required to. I carry a badge because I've earned it. But I shouldn't have to flash that badge to prove I belong in my own driveway. No one should. Several people nodded, some clapping softly. The energy in the room shifted. Karen fidgeted, shrinking in her seat. He gestured around the room. We have kids here, families, people from all walks of life. If we want safety, it won't come from policing each other with phone calls and false reports. It comes from trust, respect, and knowing the difference between danger and discomfort. A murmur of agreement swept through the residence. One neighbor raised his hand. Marcus, you handled yourself yesterday with more professionalism than most of us would have had in your shoes. Thank you. Applause broke out, stronger this time, filling the room with a unity that hadn't existed before. Karen tried one last time, her voice cracking as she leaned toward the microphone. I only wanted to protect everyone. But Mr. Patel shook his head firmly. Karen, you've been hiding behind that excuse for years. Fines, letters, threats, now this. You're not protecting us. You're policing us. The applause grew louder, and Karen's shoulders slumped. For once, she had no power, no allies, no control. Marcus handed the microphone back and gave a small nod. I'm not your enemy. I'm your neighbor. Let's start acting like it. As he walked back to his seat, several people reached out to shake his hand. A few clapped him on the back. Respect radiated where suspicion had once lingered. Karen, meanwhile, sat alone, her clipboard trembling in her hands, the sound of her authority crumbling echoing louder than any gavel she had ever slammed. That night marked a turning point for Willow Creek Estates. The neighborhood had seen firsthand how prejudice could nearly destroy peace, and how dignity, truth, and restraint could restore it. The HOA still had rules. The lawns still had to be trimmed. The fences still had to match. But beneath the surface, something fundamental had shifted. Because from that night on, they no longer saw Marcus Reed as the black man with a gun. They saw him for what he always was, a protector, a neighbor, and a man who had earned not just a salute, but respect.